Wretched and Divine, Black Veil Bride's third album, which truly solidified them as one of the best rock bands of the 2010s. This is one of my top 5 favorite albums of all time, so I'm super excited to rant about it for 30 minutes. This was the record that introduced me to Black Veil, and it remains my favorite by them to this day. Before we continue, I just need to mention that for all the non-full-length tracks like the Fear Transmissions, Overture, and so on, I'll be talking about them with the full-length song they're connected to. Now with all that out of the way, let's get into the video. Enjoy. At last place, I have Done For You. I hate to put this at the bottom, but just like with Ritual in my last video, nothing jumps out at me. But I will say, with Wretched and Divine being a concept album, Done For You has more of a place than Ritual did. Additionally, the lyrics are very beautiful to go along with the serene instrumentals. We haven't really seen Black Veil Brides do anything quite like this before or since, which I'm not mad about, but it does make Done For You that little bit more special. I enjoy the calm piano and drums to contrast the two tracks on either side as well. I wouldn't really listen to this song normally, but I have to admit, despite its shortness and lack of energy, it's essential when listening to the full album, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The worst of the bonus tracks, Victory Call. Victory Call starts off with an amazing intro reminiscent of We Stitch These Wounds, but sadly it's all downhill from there. The rest of the song feels a bit off musically. I think it's the awkward beat which doesn't fit with the rest of the instrumentals. With a bit more speed on the drums in the chorus, Victory Call could have maybe taken a step up. The second half of the last chorus is pretty good because of the shredding and the faster beat. I just wish the rest of the choruses were like that. The verses as well feel incomplete. I don't know what would have to be added to improve, but it's another Heaven's Calling type situation. The lyrics are kinda in the whole song. I know Black Veil isn't exactly known for its lyrics anyway, but this is one of the worst cases in my opinion. If I had to sum up Victory Call in a style, it would probably be tries too hard to be epic and only ends up accomplishing that for like a fifth of the track. Like the intro, bridge, and outro are pretty good. In those parts, the energy is maintained through those faster drums. Like I mentioned earlier, the second half of the last chorus is really good with its shredding and beat and stuff. It's probably my favorite part of the song aside from the intro. Overall, it's definitely not a bad song. The fact that it's only the 14th best on the album tells you why Wretched and Divine is one of the best records ever made. Nobody's Hero suffers from many of the same issues as Victory Call. A lot of the vocal melodies sound slightly off, especially in the verses, which are very forgettable, and the tempo of the chorus feels wrong again. Other than some slightly off-sounding parts, Nobody's Hero is a very decent song that still hits on occasion. Its guitar riffs are great and there are a lot of nice guitar harmonies. Much like many of the tracks from Set the World on Fire, Nobody's Hero gets basically all its points from the guitar and drum work. CeCe's progression, particularly from the previous album, is amazing. I think his drumming style fits best with a more theatrical style like the one from this record. Despite what I said a minute ago about the chorus, it's not really that bad. All things considered, aside from the weird tempo, everything else is good. Andy's vocals are solid and the harmonies are really nice. I also think the transitions out of all the choruses are great. Bringing back the bass from the intro was a good call and it just sounds really good. My personal favorite part of this track is the guitar solo. I say the solo instead of bridge because the rest of the bridge is mediocre at best and the melody is off. The solo is honestly one of the better ones on the record despite the song's low placement. I like the frenetic atmosphere and the solo does well as a transition back into the chorus. I know Nobody's Hero is only number 13 on this ranking, but I need to emphasize again that I still really enjoy it on occasion, and its placement between Done For You and Lost It All is essential. Days Are Numbered has fallen pretty far down the ranking over time. At one point I would have considered it maybe top 5, but the lack of replay value really hurts it. Even then, it's still a good song, and there are a lot of cool things about it. First off, Burt McCracken of The Used is featured as a backup vocalist, which surprisingly works really well. He acts as a kind of panicked or insane-sounding backup choir for Andy throughout the track, and he's utilized in a very similar way as in another song I featured on this channel a few months ago. In a song called You Know What They Do to Guys Like Us in Prison by My Chemical Romance, Burt does much of the same thing. In Days Are Numbered, Burt is most obvious in the bridge where he has some screaming and singing. I do like that part, but I just gotta point out that Burt sounds like SpongeBob laughing at the end of the bridge. Sorry, I had to. It's way too obvious. Anyways, every section of Days Are Numbered is good, but mostly just that. Good. I mean, we have the bridge, which is my favorite part, and the chorus, which is nice too, but nothing else really jumps out. That's not a huge issue though, because we still have some good stuff here. The second half of the chorus is really catchy and has a nice guitar. That's the Everybody Wants Eternal Life part. And of course the bridge, mostly the first half. The screaming there is great to go along with a sort of masked mini guitar solo. One more thing I should add is even though Days Are Numbered has a higher rating than Nobody's Hero and Victory Call, all three songs are pretty close in quality. Days Are Numbered just had that tiny little push to get over the hump of 7. Also, this is the track that Abeyance is connected to. I don't know what I can say about Abeyance. It's the most boring interlude track by far, but I don't really care. I guess there needed to be some kind of transition after Shadows Die. Devil's Choir is one of the happier sounding tracks on this record. It has this hopeful atmosphere that goes along nicely with the lyrics. This song has some of my favorite lyrics on the entire album. The theme of helping to bring people out of the grasp of fear is extremely relatable for me, and the guitar melodies encapsulate that hopeful feeling perfectly. Especially the lyric, "Fear won't steal what burns in you," hits really hard. As for the musical components, Devil's Choir is very much focused on the guitars and vocals. A trend we see in Wretched and Divine is that the vocal harmonies are toned down compared to Set the World on Fire. I think Set the World on Fire often had too much emphasis on vocal harmonies, which weren't even that good most of the time. In this record, though, the harmonies are toned down and also just better. Devil's Choir is a good example of that, where instead of just trying to add extra layers to the vocals for the sake of it, the harmonies actually contribute to the atmosphere of each song. The guitars are, of course, the other main component of the track. The riff in the intro is super recognizable, and just about anywhere you look in the song, there are pleasant guitar riffs to lift your spirits. The bridge is my personal favorite part. I like the little scream into the guitar solo. Initially, I wasn't too sure how to feel about the solo, but I've come to really like the slightly darker sounding tone it has to contrast the chorus. Just a very solid, good song all around. Very consistent, good quality. Last thing, I like how Devil's Choir acts as a kind of transition between the slightly darker themed We Don't Belong and the generally more hopeful and somber Resurrect the Sun. It's kind of like a combination of those two songs, which is always cool to see. Also, Fear Transmission 2 is connected to this track. The first of the transmissions in this video so far. I like Trust. It gets to the point quickly, and theatrical violin harmonies are essential. Just like Days Are Numbered, New Year's Day has fallen down the ranking quite far since its initial placement. And it's the same main problem. There's not much replay value. I think in this case that's because the chorus gets a bit samey after a while. The slow, repeated melody is pretty monotonous despite the nice guitar in the background. I will admit though, CC's drums are really nice in this one. He controls the pace extremely well and helps to keep the firm yet softish atmosphere the song has. Additionally, the guitars do a great job at this too. They make sure the song is softer but still rocks. Andy's vocals are, like most of the album, good, and I enjoy many of the vocal harmonies. The verses are definitely the weakest part of the song, but that's not to say they're bad. While vocally they're pretty boring, the guitars in the background save it a little bit, and I surprisingly really like the pre-chorus. Funny story actually, I had some of the boys over for a New Year's sleepover type thing, and we played the song at the perfect time where the chorus played right as midnight hit. That experience gave me a slight bias for the chorus. Despite what I said about the chorus earlier, I still think it's good enough, and it has that kind of larger-than-life feeling that God Bless You does, just slightly worse. The reason New Year's Day is above previous entries, though, is the bridge. You can probably see this pattern of me loving the bridges of songs, and that generally holds for this album. I love Jinx's violin solo and the following guitar solo that builds off of it. The vocal part of the bridge is a bit but unfortunately, that carried over from a lot of the songs from Set the World on Fire. I don't think that's a huge deal though, because we have that really nice solo, and the final chorus is a great climax for the track. The outro in its own right is alright, I guess. It's a bit basic, but I do understand why it's that way. It acts as a good transition into Fear Transmission 1. It was difficult to place New Year's Day in this ranking, but I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt for now and putting it at number 10. I can maybe see it falling to 11 in the future. Maybe. I don't know. Whoa, hold on a second. I know you're already writing hate comments, but let me explain myself. If you noticed, I put an asterisk on the rating of this song a second ago. That basically means that most of the time, the song is the rating that was just shown, but at the right time, it can make a huge jump in quality. If you watched my last video on Set the World on Fire, I did the same thing with Savior. Both Savior and Lost It All can leap up the ranking with the right listening experience or mood. Lost It All is obviously most effective when you're feeling sad or hopeless. I know this and Savior aren't connected through the concept, but from a purely fan perspective, I like how Savior was a message from Andy to the fans that Black Veil Brides will always fight for them, and how Lost It All can act as more of an introspective and hopeful piece, making the listener remind themselves that they can get through their struggles. On to the musical stuff. Lost It All is one of my favorites on the record structure-wise. It of course starts off as a piano ballad where the singer is lamenting about losing everything he owned, some kind of Viva La Vida vibes. The first chorus makes excellent use of the violin to go along with Andy's soft vocals. The second verse takes a slightly less soft approach, adding light drums and strengthening the vocals and instrumentals a bit. Then is my personal favorite part of the song, the second chorus. This chorus has my favorite vocal performance from Andy on the whole record. The combination of the vocals, violin, and soft drums are absolutely masterful. If I'm sad, this is usually one of the first songs I go to. The sudden switch between hopelessness and hopefulness often helps to raise my spirits. The lyrics, as I'm sure you know, are incredible. The verses seem to take strong inspiration from Viva La Vida. Either way, the lyrics are very similar. This message of building something grand and perfect, then losing it all in the blink of an eye is very powerful, and Black Veil Bride's rendition of this theme is probably the best I've heard. I prefer the first half of the track to the second, but the second half is still very memorable and essential for the concept. This section is opposite to the first half in almost every way, turning the mood from weak and hopeless to one of strength and hope. The part features a woman singing Great Gig in the Sky style, which I don't exactly love personally, but it's a cool reference at least. In the background of all that, the violin continues the melody played in the Fear transmissions, which is great foreshadowing. After that, the guitars and drums come back in, along with Andy's vocals to lead the listener into redemption. The lyrics are simple yet powerful, reminding the listener that everyone falls down sometimes, and that that's okay. Vocal harmonies in this part are top-notch as well. Then probably the most oddly yet well-placed guitar solo on the record comes in. There's a bit of trumpet in this part too, which I don't typically love, but it's executed very well here. I don't think I've ever heard a guitar solo emanate hopefulness as well as this one. It's seriously impressive. And then of course, to finish everything off is the outro. Bringing back the soft atmosphere from the first half, this outro makes use of a church organ to perfect the sound. It reminds me a bit of Famous Last Words by My Chemical Romance in that way. Okay, this is by far the most I've ever talked about a number 9 ranked song, but I think it is very well deserved. Just some final thoughts on Lost It All. Obviously, like I mentioned, the progression and structure are done amazingly. The lyrics are so good, and the way all the different elements fit together is unmatched. I was debating talking about Fear Transmission 3 in conjunction with this, but I've decided to save that for in the end. I'll just say that Lost It All is the best song on the record in terms of concept progression and gluing the surrounding tracks together. This is the perfect transition into Fear Transmission 3, and I wouldn't ask for anything more. If you haven't listened to Lost It All, please make your first listening experience the best, listening to the whole album. I promise you that's the best way to do it. And also, don't worry, I'm not going to talk about every song for 5 hours. This was just a unique case. If you're still alive after listening to me yap about Lost It All, congratulations. Most people probably aren't. Resurrect the Sun is another one of my favorites on the record structurally and lyrically. Much like Lost It All, it starts off as this piano ballad type before blossoming into a grandiose choir of unrelenting hope, promising the wild ones that no matter who tries to stop them, they will be able to fight to bring light back to the world. I think this main theme of resurrecting the sun is worded very well, because it emphasizes how light has been blotted out from the world, and that it will take a strong force to bring it back. The verses are very soft, at least in the first one, almost depressing. This melancholy atmosphere is sharply contrasted by the much more upbeat and hopeful chorus, with its message of unstoppableness and, of course, resurrecting the sun. I won't go through every single lyric since I don't want another Lost It All situation, but this one lyric in particular always stands out to me. And my heart's held high with this battle cry. I'll march on. It's not anything incredible, but I think it's very nice. After the second chorus, we hear the first hint at something darker within the track. The repeated chanting of Resurrect the Sun is one of the better examples of gang vocals from this record. That, along with the more sinister sounding guitar and drums, works well to contrast the surrounding parts. The unexpected transition into the softer guitar solo is super beautiful to me. I don't know exactly what it means in the concept, if anything, but I love the way it sounds. The transition back into the chorus is great as well. The way the solo seamlessly fits with the pre-chorus was genius. Then, of course, is the final chorus, my favorite of the 3 choruses. The reason is that there's a bit more emphasis on the violin, which really contributes to the hopeful atmosphere the chorus is supposed to have and does have. My personal favorite part of the song is the outro. The transition from the chorus to the outro was great, and the scream within the outro was the perfect finishing touch. Honestly, that scream is so important for the song, I'm glad they included it. I don't want to ramble for too long, so I'll finish this off by saying, Resurrect the Sun is a very beautiful track, both lyrically and sonically, and the contrast between the different moods was executed extremely well. Next up is I Am Bulletproof, which is the closest we got on this album to Set the World on Fire. I Am Bulletproof is definitely the most guitar-centric song on Wretched and Divine, and that's basically it. Let's move on to number 6. Obviously, I'm kidding. There's more than just guitar. No? No, there's not. But in all seriousness, basically the song's whole identity is just guitar. I'm not complaining though, since this is undoubtedly one of the best guitar songs on the album. Now, of course, this is the opening track for Wretched and Divine, and I'd say it does a good job of setting the tone for the record. The heavy emphasis on guitar in combination with some blast beats may initially make some first-time listeners think that this record will just be a repeat of Set the World on Fire. That is, until you look at everything else. I know technically the album starts off with Exordium, but I Am Bulletproof still acts as the opener, and right out the gate, if you pay attention you can tell something's different. It's hard to describe, but everything sounds bigger, like more theatrical and grand. Whether that's because of the gang vocals, guitar melodies, or anything else, I Am Bulletproof starts Wretched and Divine off right with a rush of adrenaline that makes the listener excited for what's to come. While it's obviously not my favorite track on here, every album should start with an opener that represents it, and I think this does the job extremely well. There's insane guitar, some well-placed screaming, more variation in the instrumentals, the theatrical spirit, everything that makes Wretched and Divine a great record. Now, of course, I have to talk a little bit more about the guitars. The intro is incredible, one of my favorite riffs on the album. It provides that blood-pumping type of feeling that the rest of the song continues, and just sounds amazing. The background guitar in the verses is great too. I don't think the vocals would have worked as well if anything were different. And you know I have to mention the bridge. It's my favorite part because of the insane solo and drumming. CC really put on a show here too. It's one of my favorite Black Veil songs drum-wise, and the drumming goes along with the guitars and vocal style flawlessly. Another thing I need to talk about is the little screaming accents throughout the track, most notably in the intro, bridge, and outro. They add some nice intensity that wouldn't have been there otherwise, and if I were a Black Veil Brides fan in 2012, I would be ecstatic to hear that the band didn't completely abandon screaming like the previous album had trended towards. Last thing I'll mention is Exordium. It's fine, I guess. It's needed for the story, and I guess it's cool how the piano fades in to lead into the first full track. Like I said, I Am Bulletproof is the perfect opener, and it's actually insane that it's only number 7 on this list. We Don't Belong is one of Black Veil Bride's most underrated songs in my opinion. I see so many people write it off just because of the admittedly weird intro. Other than that though, We Don't Belong is a very strong track with many unique qualities that bring it up this far on my ranking. First off, it acts as the perfect transition between Wretched and Divine and Devil's Choir, not including Trust. The shift from the slightly more war-driven Wretched and Divine into a tone of acceptance. The titular line, We Don't Belong, seems to be the rebels accepting that they will never be accepted by fear and that that's okay. They ridicule the church for its failures and foolishness, and revel in the fact that they will never be a part of it again. We Don't Belong, as you can probably tell, is one of my favorite songs on this record lyric-wise, and I think the sounds emulate the message very well. The switch from melodic guitar riffs into a heavier emphasis on violin and gang vocals helps the transition into Devil's Choir like I said earlier. Now onto the actual song and structure and stuff. Let me just say that I understand why people hate on the intro. I don't dislike it, but it is a bit odd and doesn't really fit with the rest of the track. As I've mentioned, the larger presence of the violin really makes parts like the pre-chorus, end of bridge, and outro pop. I also enjoy the softer guitar sounds throughout the song. Whether it's some higher-pitched riffs in the verses or the lower-pitched stuff in the chorus, the guitar's presence as a passenger rather than the driver helps this track reach its full potential. The chorus is extremely catchy as well. I know a lot of people will write off any song that has O's in it, but I think that's stupid. This song makes good use of the O's as the crowd of rebels. My favorite part is, you guessed it, the bridge. I really like how the guitar solo starts right off the chorus, because that helps the solo to retain the energy from the more energetic chorus. And honestly, that little yeah that Andy does during the solo adds so much to this section. This actual solo is pretty good. I'd argue the shredding is not as important to the atmosphere as the backing guitar, but as I said, the yeah complements everything really well. The rest of the bridge builds suspense nicely too. I love when songs call back to the opening line later on, and the way it's executed with Andy just talking while backup vocalists sing the chorus with the violin does great to prepare you for the chorus. Another situation like the yeah and the solo, the scream at the end of the bridge was the perfect way to lead back into the last chorus. That scream and the yeah single-handedly put We Don't Belong above I Am Bulletproof for me. The outro does the same thing as New Year's Day, fading out in preparation for a fear transmission. Again, I don't love that method, but it does work with the structure of the record and I understand why they did it. Overall, We Don't Belong is a banger. Despite a few polarizing parts, it's made its way up to number 6. Finally, we have reached another bonus track. A few months ago, I would have had it at like number 12, and I have literally no idea why. I must have been smoking something, because Let You Down is great. This is quite obviously a guitar-centered song, with some great guitar and drum work, and one of the best solos on the record. One thing I've noticed over time is that Let You Down is in some ways just a better version of Victory Call. They start off similar, the chorus's melodies seem somewhat alike despite the large disparity in energy, and they both have some great riffs. The big difference though is that Let You Down is non-stop energy. After the first 10 seconds, there's never a dull moment. Whether it's fast-paced drums or shredding guitar, every second is filled with high-intensity, hard-rocking mastery. Like I said before, the first 10 seconds give this epic feeling much like Victory Call did, before furthering that feeling with an amazing riff and savior-esque scream. And from that point, they never look back. The verses are filled with these dangerous, on-the-run style guitars and vocals. I just want to give a shout-out to CC really quick. He does an amazing job in this one. It can be hard to notice behind all the guitar, but he dictates the pace extremely well to fit the atmosphere. Anyways, the chorus keeps the epic tone, but the lyrics suck. Dang, this is probably Black Veil Bride's most basic song lyrically, maybe ever. Good thing it sounds great, because Let You Down has nothing going for it in the lyrics department. I especially like how the second and third choruses end with that one riff. I love that riff. But my favorite is, once again, the bridge. I mean, what else could it be? The bridge starts off with some singing that keeps the energy while building up effectively into the climax or solo. I love the "I believe in you" line as well, the one good lyric in the song. The solo itself is obviously just incredible, one of my favorite solos on the album, and it's a shame more people don't know about it. The harmonies are insane, and the skill it takes to do that for both Jake and Jinx is very impressive. The final chorus is a great continuation of the bridge. It keeps that chase scene type vibe and finishes off the song and deluxe album in a respectable fashion. Just one final thought about Let You Down. This is the bonus track of bonus tracks. What I mean by that is, this is by far the least likely of the bonus tracks to make it into the main part of the record. The lyrics are the main reason for that, as they're just another cookie-cutter rebel song without really adding much to the concept or contributing anything useful. With that said though, the song still sounds really great, and there's a reason it's this high up in the ranking. Before we get into the S tier, I have Revelation, the final of the 3 bonus tracks in this video. Revelation is a lot like Let You Down sonically. There's a big focus on the guitars, and there's another amazing guitar solo. The areas Revelation is better in are mainly the lyrics, energy management, and the riffs. Don't get me wrong, Let You Down had great riffs, but Revelations are even better. Additionally, Revelation doesn't suffer as much from the bonus track-itis that Let You Down did. The lyrics are considerably better, still not amazing mind you, and I could actually maybe see it having a place in the album. And while I did enjoy Let You Down's constant energy, I think Revelation's style of taking some breathers fits better with the rest of the album, and it feels a bit more natural. There's also more emphasis on the vocals than the previous entry. Still very guitar-centric, but the vocals are more important sonically. That's mostly because of the larger emphasis on gang vocals for the progression, and the fact that something needs to fill the space of the lower energy sections. As I said a minute ago, the guitar riffs are insanely good, namely the intro and chorus. The intro riff, when combined with CeCe's awesome drums, sets the fast-paced and warish tone, which I like. The chorus riff, of course, loosely follows the vocal melody, and adds that signature Black Veil Bride's charm that makes them so great. The melody of the chorus is super addicting, and one of my favorite choruses on the record. It has the togetherness of Resurrect the Sun with the epicness of In the End, if that makes sense. The verses are also some of the best on the album, especially the second one, since their unique-ish use of the guitars makes them far less boring than many of the previous songs in this video. Now for the millionth time in a row, my favorite part is the bridge. That's because of the solo, obviously. This is one of the best solos on the whole album, if not the best, and it's definitely one of my top 5 or 10 Black Veil solos. Just the absolute mastery that Jake and Jinx show here is unfathomable. Wretched and Divine is different from the band's first 2 albums in that there's not a clear-cut best solo. Like in We Stitch and Set the World on Fire, there was a pretty clear spot for the number 1 solo, but in this record there's like 3 or 4 that it could be. I'm not here to just rank solos though, so let's get into some final thoughts. I absolutely love the transition from the solo to the last chorus, with the shredding while Andy sings Can't Turn Back Now. I think the post-chorus of Whoa, the Sound of a Nation is pretty good. On its own it's not incredible, but its placement in the song boosts it. And then last thing I'll say is about the 3 bonus tracks as a whole. They all oddly have sort of the same sound at times, despite being pretty different. Let You Down is like a much better version of Victory Call, and Revelation is a slightly better version of Let You Down, if that makes sense. Anyways, Revelation is pretty close to being in that S-tier elite category, and it's definitely one of my top 20 favorite Black Veil Bride songs. Look out for it in my Black Veil finale video. We're finally here. Starting off the S tier, we have Wretched and Divine, the title track for this album. Wretched and Divine has always been one of my favorites. I specifically remember the moment I acknowledged it was one of the elites. I had already listened to the album a few times, but one day I was listening to this song, and the opening riff hit really hard, and I realized, dang, this is a really good song. And it's kind of been that way ever since. Everything about Wretched and Divine is really great, and there's never a dull moment. Even the weaker parts of the track, like the verses, are very solid, and the highs are decently high. That being said though, the quality is very consistent, maybe a bit too consistent. Don't get me wrong, this is still higher than all the previous entries, obviously, but the best parts of this track aren't quite as good as the best parts of, say, Revelation or Let You Down. Despite all that, everything is still amazing, and that all starts with the riffs. The opening riff immediately comes in with a vengeance, pun intended, and that mini-solo type thing with the other guitar is one of the best intros to any Black Veil song. The screaming in the intro is very well placed, and it even further contributes to the more offensive vibe of the track, not offensive. The verses are again some of the best on the record, especially the pre-chorus, which always gets me excited for the chorus. The pre-chorus's lyrics, "A world of hate awaits, we are the wild ones, they all look the same, our time has come," are amazing. Not super deep or anything, but definitely one of my favorite lines on the album. The chorus itself is surprisingly, again, not as good as Revelations. It's great, don't get it twisted, but just slightly worse. I do love the use of the word unspoken though. All that's not to say the chorus isn't important, however. Quite the contrary. Obviously, the chorus includes the words "wretched and divine," the namesake of the record. Every time I put on this album, hearing those words is always the point where I get fully invested in the story and atmosphere of everything. I don't know if that makes any sense, but you'll just have to trust me. Now you already know what time it is. Bridge time. Yes, the bridge is the best part of the song. Again. As a collective, this is one of my favorite bridges on the album, and I'm not just talking about the solo. The vocal section of the bridge is the best of its kind on the record, and the solo is super nice too. Not quite at the level of Revelation or Let You Go Down's guitar solos, but very good nonetheless. I really appreciate the little scream of "divine" at the beginning of the bridge. Much like the "yeah" in the bridge of We Don't Belong, this scream adds a lot to the sound and atmosphere, and I love it. Also, this is the full-length track connected to Fear Transmission 1, and I have to say the transition between Stay Close and Wretched and Divine is, well, divine. I love the way the violins build up for the last few seconds until the guitar slams in, seamlessly fulfilling the epicness that Stay Close had been building. All the transitions from the Fear transmissions are really good, but this one is probably my favorite, or at least tied with As War Fades. That's all I really have to say about Wretched and Divine, so let's get into my top 2, which is one of the best top 2s of any album ever made. Man, I'm excited. Shadows Die has one of the coolest sounding intros of any song I've ever heard. From the moment I first listened to it, I knew this was one of my favorites. That is held to this day, as you can see. This track makes me feel cool. I don't know how else to describe it, but when I listen to it, I actually feel like I'm fighting in a war of the concept. Shadows Die is the most immersive song Black Veil Brides has ever made, especially considering its connection to Overture. Just the attention to detail in every part provides an experience like no other, with intricate violin playing, well thought out drums, and of course incredible guitar riffs. Now unfortunately, I can't really talk much about the lyrics since I have family that watch my videos, but I will say that I love the unapologeticness the lyrics have. The blatant disregard for, is amazing to me, and it's essential for the concept of the record. I guess I'll start at the very beginning, the intro. So, the intro is one of my favorite parts of the song. It immediately follows Overture, a very hopeful and blissful sounding interlude, and right away when you enter Shadows Die, you can tell that something dark is afoot. The eerie atmosphere created by these guitar harmonies is extremely effective in building up to the sudden energy of the doom. The addition of the choir-like humming in the second half of the intro was a nice touch as well. Now for the verses, they're without a doubt my favorite on the album. None of the other verses really come close. I love the riff so much. It contributes nicely to the intensity and angry tone. The way it follows the vocal melody of the verses but with a slightly more dark spin is genius. CC probably has his best performance of the record in this one too. The drums seem heavier than the rest of the songs, and that fits perfectly with the obviously much more vengeful nature of the track. The pre-chorus, the first one specifically, is pretty nice. The second one is kinda but I don't think it really needs to be extraordinary. The first pre-chorus though, that scream is the perfect fit. Like I've said with many of the small accents throughout the video, this scream adds a lot of personality and it's necessary. Now we get to the chorus, which is again one of the best parts of the song. Like I mentioned a minute ago, the unapologeticness of the lyrics is amazing, and when combined with super epic guitar riffs, this chorus absolutely slaps. CC is a beast. Now you may be surprised to hear that the bridge is not my favorite part. Well, kind of. I honestly don't have a favorite part of Shadows Die. It's amazing all the way around, so forgive me for my lack of ability in this instance. Despite that, the first half of the bridge, the part with lyrics, is still amazing and one of the most epic 30 seconds of the album. Everything about this part screams mastery, with Jinx killing it on the violin, CC just totally wrecking those drums, and Andy becoming the greatest actor of all time. Okay, the last part's an exaggeration, but seriously, Andy does a great job as the voice of Fear. Another really awesome thing about this part is how you can kind of tell Fear is starting to panic or break. In the first two transmissions, Fear sounds very confident, but now you can hear the panic in his voice, similar to the breakdown in This Is How I Disappear by My Chemical Romance, my favorite song of all time. Onto the guitar solo, surprisingly it's one of the worst solos on the album, shredding-wise. It's very slow and maybe a bit boring at times, but there's a good reason for that. With the energy fading out during the line, "For the shadows are where you will remain safe," they couldn't just go straight into a crazy solo. I actually like the callback to the intro with the riff and choir. The violin accenting this section is very nice as well. The last 20 seconds or so of the solo drops the violin and choir and picks up heavier drums and the slamming bass guitar. While it can be a bit boring sometimes, this 20-second clip perfects that epicness the song is going for. It makes me think of a scene where you defeat a boss in a video game, and just when you think you've won, this clip plays and, to your horror, the boss is rising back up for another seemingly unstoppable phase. That's a very obscure description, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. I'm going to force myself to stop talking about the bridge now. The last chorus is of course goated. It's so epic, and the following outro completes the cycle with another callback to the intro. I love when songs go full circle like this. They do it again in Shadow's Rise a few albums later, but I'm going to save that for its video in 3 weeks. I almost forgot, Overture. As many of you probably know, Overture is an all-violin interlude track between Resurrect the Sun and Shadows Die. It starts a trend of playing melodies from the other tracks on the album, but with these angelic violin harmonies put together by Jinx. I'm so glad Jinx is in this band, because the violin in the interlude tracks are so important for this record. There was so much more I could have said about Shadows Die, but this video is getting long enough already, and I didn't want to go into every single tiny detail, so you're welcome. You have been spared for now. But that's all I really have to say, so prepare yourself for the #1 best song on this album. You already know what it is. At last, we have reached #1, In the End. Obviously, what else could it have been? But before I talk about that, I've decided to do this one a little bit differently, and start out with Fear Transmission 3, As War Fades. Buckle your seatbelts, cause this is going to be a long one. As War Fades is without a doubt my favorite of the transmissions. Its placement between two amazing tracks and the way it fits with them is amazing. And even though it's obviously nothing incredible on its own, this interlude is extremely important for the concept. It starts off with, of course, the violin, but with the same pace as the violin in Lost It All, or at least very close to it. Just like I mentioned a minute ago in Shadows Die, Fear sounds much more stressed out than he did in the first two transmissions. He knows Fear might be in great danger, and you can tell he's struggling to reaffirm the crowd that they'll be safe from the, quote, insurgent horde. To follow the nervous-sounding voice, the violins get increasingly more anxious-sounding. Jinx adds high-pitched violin notes to build up to the climax of the album. I really appreciate the way this interlude ends. In the final second, Fear Andy gets pushed out and Rebel Andy comes in. He refutes the words of Fear with the word but to lead into the climax, or in other words, in the end. Now we can finally get to this song. In the End is, as we all know, Black Veil Bride's biggest hit by far. It has received awards and is certified platinum in the US. Oftentimes, when I hear non-Black Veil fans talk about the band, this is always the song they enjoy most out of the hits, and it's easy to tell why. It's catchy, has insane guitar riffs, it's catchy, and did I mention it's catchy? In the End takes all of the best aspects of Wretched and Divine's other songs and puts them together in one legendary experience. The use of violins with respect to their use in the previous two tracks is done well, and the seamless fit with the violins and guitars is just unheard of. The riffs are again actually insane. I'll probably say that about 50 more times in this video, but I mean, come on, how could I not? I'm going to try not to go super deep into every part, but I may struggle with that a bit, so bear with me. The track starts off with that amazing transition from As War Fades. The violin immediately switches from sinister and anxious to hopeful and confident as the rebels take over the sound. Starting the song off with a mini-chorus was a good move too. Using gang vocals instead of just Andy for that part was smart because it emphasizes that the rebels are united. I'm probably reading way too deep into that, like an English teacher, but oh well. The verses are very solid as well, still not as good as Shadows Die, but the violin in them helps to build energy for each chorus, which I like. There's not really a pre-chorus here, so let's just get straight into the chorus. As you know, In the End's chorus is ridiculously catchy. I love how overwhelmingly positive and confident the rebels are amidst the obvious war scene that the song takes place in. The rebels all simultaneously declare that they're not afraid to die, which is a kick to the face of Fear, who was trying to act all tough just a minute before. The lyrics definitely aren't the most creative, maybe even a little basic, but in this case I personally think that was necessary. If you really think about it, most of the wild ones are probably kids or at least young adults, and the unapologetic declaration of freedom they have is emulated perfectly by the lyrics. The vocal harmonies in the chorus are also some of the best on the record. I know I've kind of dissed on a lot of Black Veil's harmonies, especially in the first two albums, but In the End and Wretched and Divine as a whole for that matter are really good. I've said it best earlier during Devil's Choir, so I won't repeat it. Then comes the bridge, which is another one of my favorite parts of the song. This is kinda odd. Usually I have a clear-cut favorite part of most songs, but in both of the top two tracks on this record, it's not so easy to tell. I guess if I had to choose, I could say the last chorus and the outro, but just know that In the End's quality is extremely consistent throughout, in a great way. The entire bridge is a guitar solo, and let me just say, it's incredible. Even though the solo is only about 15 seconds long, it packs an emotional punch that'll make you jump out of your seat and start chanting "Fight" like Trump did in Pennsylvania. I'm gonna get cancelled, I swear. The guitars themselves are just insane. The harmonies are super skillful, and all the notes sound amazing together. I also enjoy the violin in the background. It keeps that hopeful atmosphere going even stronger. I love how the last chorus starts off with a callback to the intro with the violin and gang vocals. Like I said 5 times earlier in the video, I love when songs call back to previous parts, and this is another good example of that. The final chorus is, of course, the climax of the entire album. The guitar in the background of this particular chorus helps to really drive home the point that the rebels are winning the fight. Mini 12-second guitar solo in between the two halves of this chorus is the point where I imagine the rebels finally win the fight outright. When I imagine the song as a soundtrack to a grand war scene in a movie, that mini-solo is always the point where I see the leader of Fear being taken captive. I just came up with this analogy while writing this, but if this album were the 2016 NBA Finals, that bridge is Kyrie hitting the three-pointer, and the next mini-solo is LeBron getting the chase-down block. Sorry, I'm rambling now, let me stop. Then the second half of the last chorus is the rebels standing tall in victory, now completely free from the grasp of fear, and declaring that they're not afraid to die. I'm sorry, I know that was a lot of yapping, but I think in the end was deserving of a long-winded rant. Again, I almost forgot about the Fear final transmission. I don't really have much to say except, yeah, it's really cool to see Fear completely defeated, but still trying to act like he's right. The switch from higher-pitched fast violin into slow and depressing violin, along with sad piano, is poetic. And also the fact that he says, "You cannot escape fear," right after the Wild Ones literally did escape fear, is funny. But anyways, as you can tell by the 10 out of 10 rating I gave it, In the End is one of my favorite songs of all time. Definitely top 15 or 20, and it has a very special place in my heart as a song that introduced me to one of my favorite bands ever. Thank you to Black Veil Brides for making this amazing music. Well, that was my ranking of Black Veil Brides' Wretched and Divine, the story of the Wild Ones. I call this final section of the video final thoughts / outro, but I rarely actually give any final thoughts on the music itself. This time though, I've decided to go off script for a minute and just give some general opinions on this album and how great it is. I know I've said a lot of amazing fanboy type things about this album in the last 40 minutes, but if I'm being honest, very few albums are more deserving. This is, like I said at the beginning, one of my top 5 favorite albums ever, and it's just the theatrical aspect of it is unmatched by like almost any album out there. There's a really big reason that this is the band's favorite album that they made, and also the fans' favorite album. At least, I think. That's what I've seen. But, I saw an interview with Andy, and he had this point that the reason this was the band's favorite album was because it was the first one they did from scratch, and to go along with that, everybody was just together, really like on the same page, working on everything. Obviously in the later albums, like Veil especially, everybody was really not on great terms. They had barely been in the same room. But with Wretched and Divine, you can definitely tell that they worked really hard and they had all these great minds working together to make the best sounding music possible. I mean, the lyrics in the album aren't necessarily amazing. I mean, there are definitely great songs lyrically, like Lost It All and Resurrect the Sun, but I don't think the lyrics are as important as a lot of people seem to think. Honestly, I mean, you need some lyrics, like Let You Down, lyrics-wise, is really bad, and that kind of lets it down. That was unintentional, but some albums need to be lyric-based, and some don't, and this is one of those where they don't need to be lyric-based. Albums like Linkin Park especially, Meteora, the reason why it's a top 3 album for me is because of its lyrics most of the time, but Wretched and Divine gets by without that. Its guitars are insane. I probably said that like at least 100 times in the video, but the guitars, the riffs, the solos, everything, best guitar album I've personally listened to off the top of my head. And CC, the previous album he was good, but this album he really killed it. This is still probably my favorite CC album. And Jinx, the violin, definitely the best violin album they made as well. The theatrical spirit is kind of necessary. The violin is necessary for that. And I just really love how everything comes together. It's so amazingly done. Everything is so amazingly done to the point where I doubt anybody will ever make an album this theatrically great again. Maybe I'm out of my mind for saying that, but I do believe it. I know I'm a rock fan, so a lot of the theatrical albums are definitely not rock. They're more orchestral in nature, like straight up orchestral and opera and stuff, which I don't personally like, and a lot of people do. But in the rock scene, this is probably the best theatrical album that I've heard. Despite the kind of mediocre lyrics at times, like In the End, doesn't have amazing lyrics even for being one of my favorite songs by them, but the sound and stuff and the context and everything, I can't really fault it because it's just so amazing otherwise. What else do I have to say? Okay, Shadows Die, a quick thought that I forgot to put in. I used to think it sounded like the intro sounded like an anime intro, like all the parts before with before the parts with vocals, really nice. Wretched and Divine, obviously the opening riff, like I said, amazing. One of my favorite Black Veil riffs. I would go through every track again, just off the top of my head, but I am gonna save you some time. Honestly, if you're still here at this point in the video, please let me know in the comments if you can. I honestly don't think anybody will make it this far, but it would be super encouraging to me to know if you did, so just please leave a comment, and yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to get back to the end of my script now. That is all from me now. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for future rock music related content. I post every weekend, usually Saturdays, and I have some more awesome Black Veil Bride stuff coming soon. I promise this video is way longer than any of my future Black Veil videos. This is my favorite record by them, so I wanted to make it extra special. This is the third in a series of 9 Black Veil related videos, so like I said, if you did enjoy this one, definitely look out for future episodes. I've really enjoyed making this series so far, and I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I've enjoyed making it. You're welcome to leave your own ranking of these songs in the comment section. I always love to see fellow fans' opinions. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day, guys.